And you would say to yourself, well, isn't this about someone possessing a firearm? And the answer is yes. However, who is covered by the Second Amendment, Richard?
Yeah, we have the text in the Second Amendment. It's
We are the Arms Attorneys. Today we're talking about a new case to be decided regarding the Second Amendment rights of illegal aliens to the United States. Stick around. We're going to talk about what case this is, what it means for persons who are not citizens of the United States, what it means for who the Second Amendment applies to generally, and finally, what's going to happen from here. But before we get started, show your support for the Second Amendment by hitting the like button.
And thank you to Emily and Edwin for holding the fort down while I was out of town.
You're welcome.
We had a good time. Went to Honduras, went to Mexico. So enjoyed my time off, but I'm happy to be back with y'all. And a lot of crazy things happened while I was gone. I really checked out of the news for a little while, and then I came back online, and whew-wee, you guys are busy.
That's how I live, though, is not on the internet.
Yeah.
So it actually is nice what I'm doing. It's good.
Well,
I get my news from Richard.
Well, what's crazy is, all right, so we're going to be talking about this Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals case. And I thought, this story popped up when I came back. There are roving gangs of Venezuelans taking over Colorado.
So I hear.
Yeah, and we're going to talk about that a little bit too, and how these kind of two things interact with each other. But, first things first, this is United States v. Jose Paz Medina Cantu. We'll flash the case number up. We'll link it in the description below. But the long story short of this, Mr. Cantu was charged with illegal re-entry, unlawful possession of firearms and ammunition by somebody who is not lawfully present in the United States. Among other things, he was convicted in the United States District Court, Southern District of Texas. Now, this is where he initially filed a motion to dismiss the indictment, saying, hey, guess what? I think this provision of 18 U.S.C. 922 G5, that's our general prohibition on aliens here in the United States, saying that was unconstitutional. The court denied that motion. He entered into kind of a plea agreement, pled guilty. But, whenever you challenge these things in the trial court level, you still preserve some issues on appeal. He appealed this to the Fifth Circuit. And I will say the Fifth Circuit gave us a brief opinion.
They did. It is nice to see a brief opinion out of the Fifth Circuit because, man, we spend a lot of time reading a lot of pages from them. But it was straight to the point and interesting. And I think that it is, just to give you a little bit of background on sort of what happened, is the Fifth Circuit decided a very similar case back in 2011. And that case was the United States versus Portillo Munoz. And essentially, the criminal defendant came back here and said, listen, since that case was decided, we have this Bruin case, changes the Second Amendment analysis. And so while generally the Fifth Circuit would look back to Portillo Munoz and say, this controls, this is our precedent, we are bound to follow this decision, criminal defendant in this case came and said, no, because you see, you have a Second Amendment case out of the Supreme Court, which abrogates, fancy legal word, abrogates Portillo Munoz. This issue is new for decision. You don't have to follow that case. Here we are. Use your Bruin analysis and tell me I have Second Amendment rights. Tell me that prohibiting illegal immigrants from the United States from possessing firearms is a violation of the Second Amendment. And so what happens?
Well, unfortunately, Justice Alito gave us a note in New York State Rifle and Pistol Association v. Bruin that completely undercut that argument. That case was really about what is the legal framework by which we look at infringements to the Second Amendment. And Alito says, hey, guess what? We're not abrogating any opinions here. We're not talking about who can possess firearms. This is just when we look at an infringement, this is the test that you're going to use going forward. So that argument kind of went out the window.
Right. But they still apply to a Bruin analysis, right?
Yeah, we have our Bruin analysis. We say, is the Second Amendment implicated? If yes, look at the plain text of the Second Amendment. It's informed by history and tradition of the way that firearms laws existed at the time of the adoption of the Second Amendment, 1791. And then if the government can't muster, kind of a law out of the text of the Second Amendment off of something that would have been permissible, not considered an infringement under the Second Amendment back then we say, okay, then guess what? We get to regulate this thing. And this analysis, I will say, is a little fascinating because we base it off of the text of the Second Amendment.
Right. So most of the time when we see a Bruin analysis applied through the courts, what we see is step one, easy pass, right?
Yeah.
Yes, this is implicated, this implicates the Second Amendment because we're talking about possession of,
Weapon, firearm.
firearms. We're talking about carry laws. We're talking about, things that are very clearly your Second Amendment right. And you would say to yourself, well, isn't this about someone possessing a firearm? And the answer is yes. However, who is covered by the Second Amendment, Richard?
Yeah, we have the text in the Second Amendment. It's the people.
The people. And so what we have is, and this is where the Fifth Circuit goes back, says, we did not abrogate this past case. That past case concludes that the people does not pertain to anyone who is here illegally. That's not the people.
Yeah, and I mean it makes sense, and I'll say it's created a little bit of a firestorm online because we have, I guess we say absolutists, or say everybody should be able to have nuclear weapons all the time. Okay, we got those people. That's fine. I mean, there's pros and cons to everything, right? And then we have folks who think that the Second Amendment is a living document and only the militia should have guns, and don't think that we're there. Then we have some folks who are closer to what the Supreme Court has done in applying a, constitutional constructionist approach to, hey, what did the founders mean when they wrote these words down? And I think that's kind of how we get to the conclusion here.
Yeah, and it is it's an interesting debate to be had. Are firearms so important to our God-given rights to self-preservation, to defense, that every human being here in the country, no matter what, right, no matter of immigration status, no matter felony convictions, no matter
whether they have the legal capacity,
right, does every human being deserve the right to a firearm, or are there limits to it? And I think that there are pro-gun people on both sides of the aisle who can have differing opinions, and we're all still pro-Second Amendment, right? But it's one of those issues where it's not so cut and dry. And I think there are a lot of different opinions out in the community about it. But this one is, by the Fifth Circuit, very, very clear. I do not see this going anywhere. Illegal immigrants not going to have the right to possess firearms under the Second Amendment. And I don't see the Supreme Court, I don't see them changing that.
No. And I think a good analogy for this is we think about different words that were used at the time of the Declaration of Independence or the adoption of the Constitution. The word liberty, the way that we all probably talk about the word liberty just means capacity to do something, or you're allowed to do, whatever you want to do. Or, when the founders used the term liberty, what they were talking about is absence of tyranny, or at least being able to vote and have kind of control or representation whenever, they make up law. And so, we look at what did they mean at the time that they wrote this stuff. This is consistent with that decision.
I think it is.
Now, what does this mean for our roving gangs of Venezuelans who are taking over apartment complexes in Aurora, Colorado?
Well, I think it means if they have illegal status, they are not in lawful possession of those firearms that they are roving around with. So maybe that might, if the law is enforced, it might make people in Colorado feel moderately safer.
Yeah, I've seen a lot of weird takes on this. First off, the media we don't hate the media enough. They got this story totally wrong. DHS confirms, hey, guess what? We got criminal elements from outside of the country, not legally present in the United States, doing kind of crazy stuff. All right. So all the self-defense implications aside and how messed up that entire situation is, I think it would be fair to say that they do not have Second Amendment rights.
They do not have Second Amendment rights. So
yeah, there's probably like 20 different debates going on here. And so there's a lot to it. But we hope you enjoy this discussion. If you did, consider subscribing, hitting that like button, and help us fight the anti-2A algorithm by sharing this video.
And leave us a comment. I'm genuinely interested in what you guys as our viewing community think. Do you think that every person, illegal or not, deserves a Second Amendment right here in this United States of America? Or do you think that there are appropriate limits? Until next time, we're the armed attorneys.